Most of you know me. My name is Lee. I'm one of the guides here at GetSetUp. So glad you joined us here early this morning on Saturday. We're going to be talking about online banking. Some people call it peer-to-peer, P2P payments, and using your digital wallet. And so we're going to be talking about that today. There'll probably be a lot of questions. So feel free to unmute yourself or use chat, whatever you're comfortable with, and ask any questions at any time. So we're going to be covering why to send money using your phone, how to use it, how to send money. Is it safe to actually send money? That's probably what holds us back all from doing something new like this. And choosing the right service that best fits your needs. And most importantly, how much does it cost to actually send money? Because it is such a convenience. What are we paying for convenience? So we're going to be talking about that as well. Before we get started, I'm just curious, has anybody who's here, has anybody done a electronic peer-to-peer using like a Venmo or Zelle or any of those services? Has anybody done that yet? You can unmute yourself or use chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
I've used Zelle.
You've used Zelle. Okay, good. Great. And how'd that work out for you, Michael?
It goes pretty good. It's not bad at all.
Okay, good. Anybody else use Zelle or Venmo or PayPal? Any of these services?
I use PayPal.
You use PayPal? Okay, great.
I do too.
Okay, great. So we've got some experts here. That's great. Excellent.
I tried to use PayPal, but signing up and all, it didn't work. I gave up.
All right. Yeah, that happens to a lot of us. No doubt about it. So let's talk about a little bit about the terminology I mentioned here a few minutes ago. Peer-to-peer, P2P. That's an expression that we hear a lot about. Peer-to-peer banking. Another term that you hear a lot about or see is ACH, which is automated clearinghouse. That is where your electronic transaction goes through. It's a clearinghouse to actually make all this work. So ACH is a term that you see. You might see it actually in your banking statements as well. That was an ACH transaction. So that's what that stands for. And how big is this market? Well, last year, there was over 27 billion worldwide transactions on electronic banking, 27 billion, and it's growing at about 8 to 10% a year. So this is where it is definitely all going. And so if you're not on board yet, it's coming to you very, very quickly because it is so convenient. There's no doubt about it. But you do pay for convenience. So there is a cost for convenience, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you've got your volume turned up or you know your volume key is on your computer, turn it up. I've got a couple videos I want to show you so you know what we're talking about here today. And I think it will give you a better idea of what we're talking about when we talk about peer-to-peer and the pluses and minuses. So I'm going to try to serve that up to you. Okay, here we go. I'm going to hit play and hopefully you can hear it on your computer.
When you receive money on Cash App, money will be added to your Cash App balance instantly. Check if you've been paid by going to the Activity tab by tapping on the clock icon. All your payments will be listed. You can send a request to a Cash App user to prompt them to send you what you're owed. To request a payment, go to the Cash tab by tapping the money icon at the bottom. Use the number keys to type the amount you want to request, and then tap Request. Add the contact's name, email, or phone number, and next to For, type in the reason for the request. Tap Request in the top right to confirm. If they accept, the amount will be added to your balance, and you can check your payments in the Activity tab. If someone's paid you and you can't see it in your account, go to the Activity tab. At the top, you should see their payment listed under Pending. On the right-hand side, there'll be an Accept icon. Tap here to approve the payment, and it'll be added to your Cash App balance instantly.
So I just wanted to show you that one real quickly. It is very, very easy to use. Most of the apps are similar. There's different features and benefits to each. It's just what's more convenient to you. But I actually wanted to show you this other video. So the first video I actually wanted to show to the people that have actually never have done a transaction from their phone. It is very, very easy to do. Once you do it once or twice, you get the hang of it. Nothing's easy the first time. It's usually a little bit of challenge where things are. But after the first couple times, you go, oh, this is pretty convenient. This is pretty easy. So I'm going to show you, they're going to talk about the safety of actually doing one of these transactions, the pluses and minuses. And I think it spells it out very, very clearly. So here we go again, one more time, one last video.
Peer payment apps like Venmo and Zelle make paying for things a breeze, but there's a catch. A lot of these apps don't offer the same level of protection against scams that most credit cards do. So this morning, I'm at the bottom line on what to do to protect your bank account. Listen up. In an AARP survey of Americans 18 and older, more than half of respondents incorrectly thought they could reclaim money sent in error when using peer-to-peer payment apps.
Peer-to-peer payment apps aren't banks and they're not credit cards, which makes it much harder for consumers to have recourse and get their money back.
Consumer Reports has some tips to protect yourself. First, send money only to people you know and trust. Exercise caution when paying businesses with these peer-to-peer apps. And if you have any suspicion of something being a scam, go to the Better Business Bureau's Scam Tracker website. It can give you a better idea if the product or service you're looking for is an easy scam target.
So I just
Sign
wanted
up today for the Chick-fil-A Labor Day 5K, benefiting My Town Miracles. The 5K features a family-friendly post-race.
They always have to get their ads in. So I think it's really important that you, what's in that second video that's really, really critical. When you use these peer-to-peer payment apps, it's critical that you know the other party at the other end. For instance, if it's a family or a friend or somebody you know, or a reputable business. If you're out garage selling one day and you go, oh gosh, they've got it set up so I can use a Venmo or PayPal to pay for whatever I'm buying at a garage sale. You don't know these people, you'll never see them again. And so you probably more than likely will just want to use cash, the old fashioned way. Some people use those payment transactions where you can slide your credit card over and it's attached to their maybe iPad or phone. Those are using your credit card. Those are easy and safe. But when you use this peer-to-peer and you don't know the person at the other end, I'd be very hesitant to make that transaction. Even though it is convenient, it could wreak havoc later. Because if it's a transaction and you realized that you didn't make the transaction or you made it by mistake, there's no recourse. For instance, if you use your credit card, you can call the credit card company and say, I did not make that payment. I don't know who made that payment. My information was stolen from me. There's recourse. There's also recourse on, cash is you're either in or you're out. It's really black and white. But when it comes to peer-to-peer, there's no protection. So, which is really, the fault of Congress. They've ignored this for so long. And the problem is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger because more and more people are using their phones to make payments. But still to this day, there's no FDIC, there's no recourse if you use these wireless transactions from your phone. So just be very, very careful. Does anybody have any questions, or does this happen to anybody that they want to share? Okay. All right.
Does
So-
this include PayPal?
Any of them, any of the transactions, you just have to be very, very careful that it's reputable, that you're paying. It could happen to anybody. because there is no recourse. There's no protection. There's no federal oversight on these transactions like a bank or a credit card. And most of the time it's fine, but if you don't know who the person is or the business is at the other end and you don't trust them or don't have any relationship or they're not reputable, you don't know anything about them, I'd be very hesitant, even though it's convenient. But it could happen to any of them. So who are the big players in this business? Well, as many of you've already volunteered, PayPal is definitely one of the biggest. Not only is PayPal big, but they also bought Venmo, so they own Venmo. Most people don't know that. It is rated the highest, so it is rated high. Some of the transactions can be very, very costly. There's another one called World Remit. World Remit is an international for transferring money internationally. That is a reputable one as well. Most people know Cash App. That is the little square. You might have used Square. That's the little adapter that people used to put on their phones or tablets. And you could scan your credit card right over that and it would connect to the phone or tablet. And it would make the transaction that way. Much like the machines at the retail stores or whatnot. But so their name is no longer Square. That's what everybody knew them as, but it's known as Cash App. So that's also convenient. And of course, Venmo seems to be the Kleenex name or Coca-Cola name in the business. Everybody knows Venmo, and a lot of people do use it. And again, it is owned by PayPal. They do charge a transaction fee. Most have a transaction fee, most of them, not all of them, depending if you send money from one person to another person, there might be a 1% or a 3% charge. You're paying for convenience, you're paying for time, and you're just paying for the convenience of using this technology to make all this work. And so the middle person needs to make a little bit of money to pay for these services because it does cost them to run it. So there is a 1 to 3% transaction. Some of them use it. I have a monthly bill. I use it through Venmo, and it takes it from my bank and puts it into another bank. And it usually takes 2 or 3 days. There is no charge for that, but they hold the money for 2 or 3 days. So they're probably making some interest on that as well. So it is a very, very convenient way to make transactions. There's no doubt. So some of you have mentioned that use PayPal. I don't know if anybody's used World Remit. Maybe you have for international transaction. Cash App, I'm sure most of us have probably used it in one form or another in the past. Maybe you've used it now. And then again, Venmo is the one that most people know about. And again, PayPal owns Venmo. Okay. So there's certainly pros and cons to all of them. They're very quick. Some of them can be very, very complex. There's no doubt about it. You just have to be very, very careful. One that I have not mentioned yet, I was going to mention, and well, let's just get to it before I get ahead of myself here. Another one that you might be familiar with if you use Facebook or Instagram, they have one called MetaPay. That's for making transactions. You can use that through their chat app on Facebook or Instagram. And then one that a lot of people are familiar with that I think Michael brought up was Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E. Some people call it Zelle or Zelly. I don't know how they pronounce it, but I think it's Zelle. This is the one you need to be a little bit careful with. Zelle is attached to just about everybody's bank account. If you use some of the large banks, large institutions like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, some of the big banks, they automatically connect Zelle to your account. But if you use Zelle, and even though it's on your bank, it's not protected by your bank. So there's no protection. As I mentioned before, and it showed on the video, there is no recourse. If you make a payment, for instance, if you type in, you're paying somebody $18 and you accidentally typed in $118, and you send it to the person, well, you better hope that they're going to be honest enough to send you the $100 back. But in some cases they might, and you don't have any recourse. So even though Zelle goes through the bank, it's attached to the bank, it's not attached to the protection of your bank. So that is one I steer away from, because I don't like the fact that the banks have automatically tied my account to Zelle for convenience, but they're not giving me the protection. So that is one I'd like to steer away from, that's for sure. So these transactions that we make, well, when did they first start? Well, this is going to be surprising to you. Transactions like this, not electronically, but we started to make transactions as human beings all the way back into 1851. 1851, we started doing this trading and bartering, and then money and currency came into play. And now we've got using our phones to make electronic transactions, which is certainly convenient, but it does come at a cost and does come at a risk. So it is getting better. It is getting easier. It is getting extremely fast to make these payments. There's no doubt about it. And then the ones that are attached to our phones that you're familiar with are Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay. Those are ones that are attached to our phones if we want to use those as well. All right. So what are the service fees? As I mentioned, service fees can go anywhere from 1 to 3% is a transaction fee to pay for these services. Again, you're paying for cost of time and convenience. So there is a cost to that. It's not like they're making a lot of money to do this, but you know, they're quote unquote banking on the fact that they're making a lot of transactions on their system. That's going to add up to a lot of money. But for you as the end user, it's really not that, 1 to 3%. It's not that big considering the convenience of this. So the IRS has decided that they want to be in this business too, and they're not protecting us. There's no protection, but they like to get their grubby hooks into it. So any transaction that is over $600 and above as of January 1st, there will be, you will need to submit a 1099-K form for these transactions. They're really going after businesses that are using Venmo or PayPal or Zelle or some of these organizations. They're really going after them for picking up transactions. They're really not going after us, the consumer, because most of us are not using these systems to make $600 charges on. But that's what they're doing. So you need to submit a tax form as of January 1st. All right. Any questions so far?
Yeah, it sounds like though, if you were selling stuff online, Facebook Marketplace, whatever, eBay, if you racked up more than $600 in transactions, you'd have to declare that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's even if I'm selling, my grandmother's china or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, Susan. Anybody else? Okay. So what is the best service? Well, that is the $1 million question. There's no doubt about it. Again, Zelle, it's instant bank transfer. It's connected to most of the large banking institutions. There's certainly pros and cons. I talked about that a minute ago. Venmo, it's the name that most people are aware of that's used. Again, it's like the Kleenex saying, I need a tissue. Well, you get a Kleenex. It's the same type of thing. Most people use Venmo, and it works out very, very well for most people. Again, there is no recourse if you type in the wrong numbers, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Cash App, PayPal, certainly the biggest. Can be a little bit costly per transactions. We have a taxi guy in our area, like an Uber driver, and he uses just PayPal, which is fine, but it can get a little bit costly, but that's what he uses, and it works out fine. Google Pay, I use Google Pay pretty frequently, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Apple Pay, and there's also some social media ones, as I mentioned, Meta is the one that Facebook uses. That's one they've devised. And I've used that, I think once on a Facebook marketplace transaction that I purchased something on. Anybody has used any of these, have had any issues or problems other than just user problems just in the beginning because you know it was the first time, but has anybody had any pluses or minuses about any of these they want to share? Okay.
I've used Cash App and it really is easy. It's, you know, once you get all the technology out of the way and you get complete verification on both sides, so you know exactly what transpired and have a record of it. You just have to make sure that you have the right technology working for you when you use it. But if you do, yeah, it's quick and easy, and you always have documentation to back you up.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for adding that. Did you do it right from your phone or a tablet or probably your phone, I'm assuming?
I've done it from a tablet and my phone.
Okay.
So it works both ways.
Great. Awesome. So Cash App is rated one of the highest, and you can see the rating scores. I don't know how all this rating, I've never rated anything before in my life, so online, but maybe some of you have. But again, it's rated very, very high. PayPal rated high. Venmo rated extremely high as well. Most people don't know about this. Western Union has the capability of doing this as well. There's another one called Wise, WYSE. They rated high. And again, Zelle, we talked about that a few minutes ago. Okay. So I have not used, I've used Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, and I've not used any of these other ones before. But they're rated high. So that could mean something to you or might not mean a thing to anybody. I just don't know how these things are rated. Who's rating these things? Safety tips. We talked about that a few minutes ago. Again, there's no consumer protection. So if you're concerned about that, like who wouldn't be concerned? But if you really want to jump on the bandwagon, find out who the representative, your congressperson or senator in your state, and it's in under your area, you can write them directly and say, you know, I'd like to have consumer protection. Write them directly. And for my, you know, peer-to-peer, P2P, this needs to be taken care of. We need protection on this. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. As you can see, it's growing extremely fast worldwide. So some safety tips, make sure you have a strong password. That's really critical. Don't use your birthday or anniversary. People guess those things. Make it a little bit more complicated. Mix up numbers. Use your fingerprint reader if you're comfortable with that on your phone. If it works well, use your fingerprint reader. That's a way to do things for protection. A lot of transactions, they usually want to make sure it's you. So they'll send you a text message to say, is this really you? They send you a code, you type in that code and into the app and you're able to access that app. So it's a little bit of an extra steps to do that. Make sure you turn on your notifications. So when you do make a transaction, you're notified through perhaps a text message or an email that there's been a transaction. If one shows up and you did not make a transaction, well, that will certainly alert you that someone's been has gotten some identity issues of yours that you don't want to have. Okay. Excuse me. Again, I think this is really important. Make sure when you use a Venmo or a PayPal that you trust the people. You know them. They're a reputable business. It's really, really important there. I think I've stressed that over and over again, but it's important to point that out. Okay. Change your passwords every now and then. Nobody wants to do that. It's a pain. There's no doubt about it. But if you've got a list of passwords that you keep in a safe place, not on top of your desk or your dresser where anybody can see it, but maybe in a folder or somewhere buried that you can get to, because passwords do change frequently. Or you can use like 1Password or LastPass. Those are electronic services that you can pay a yearly fee and they will house all your username and passwords. You only have to remember one. Those are things that you can look into as well. And we teach classes on that. I think Wade teaches a class on LastPass. If you have not taken that, I highly recommend it. Does anybody use any of those services? 1Password or LastPass? Okay. I'd highly recommend any of those. There's lots of them out there. And it's a nominal fee, $20 to $30 a year, maybe $35 a year for these services. They're not perfect, but they're better than writing something down on a piece of paper and giving anybody access to your information. That's for sure. It comes into your place. Okay. International transactions, I'm not going to go through every step, but there are certainly several steps it does go to, but it is very, very easy to send money overseas, especially if you're traveling and you're overseas and you need some money. We used to do Western Union or Amex cards. Well, we don't do that anymore, but I could send money to, if my wife was traveling in Europe, for an example, and she needed money, I could send her money directly through the phone, through Venmo or PayPal or any of these services, and she'd get the money directly. So it's very, very convenient. There's no doubt about it. It makes the world a lot smaller. That's for sure. So some of the pros and cons, transactions can actually take up to 3 days. As I mentioned, certainly if it's a large transaction, boy, that got something there, that's for sure. Okay. It can take up to 3 days. So the service is actually making, a little bit of percentage on the transaction, depending on how large it is. Transaction fee can be anywhere from 1% to 3%. Usually if the transaction takes 3 days, it might be a free transaction. If I'm going from a bank, an actual bank with a routing number, to another bank with a routing number and a bank account number, it might take 3 days. So they might be making a little bit of interest on that during those 3 days. But again, if it's a speedy transaction, there could be a charge from 1% to 3%. Again, ease of use, it's very easy to use, and we'll go through that in a second. But if I make a mistake and I type in the wrong number, it's important to point out that there is no recourse unless you call the person up and say, I made a mistake. Will you just send the money back? And hopefully they do. But you really don't have any recourse. You've got no leg to stand on. All the transactions, I want to say all, I say that loosely, but most transactions are encrypted, so they are secure. I don't know the encryption services they all use, but most of them are very, very strong. But again, I think the bottom line is you're paying for the cost of convenience. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Any questions with any of this? Thoughts? Did you have a question, Melinda? Okay.
I'm wondering, this might sound silly, but is there any danger if you're only on the receiving end?
Is there any danger if you're on the receiving end?
In other words, if someone wants to send you money that way, rather than you sending the money.
I don't think so. I don't. I can't think of any. If I'm receiving money from you, you want to pay me, Susan, and am I exposed to the outside world or somebody getting into my account because I'm receiving that money? I guess there's always a risk. I just don't know what that is. But as the sender, there is risk. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I just don't know enough about that. But there must be some sort of exposure.
It's just like, because you mentioned Zelle being tied to a bank account number. So I'm just wondering if there's any way, once somebody in any of these gets whatever number, because I'm not sure exactly how they work, then can you be victimized by them later unknowingly?
You probably could. This brings up a really good point, and it's just not Zelle, but that's the one I've heard about most. Zelle, when they were first came out, I don't know if they're still doing it. I just don't know. But when they first came out and they attached to people's bank account, they were using that information and using it and selling that information to marketers. And so there's an exposure there. So what are they selling and who are they selling it to and why are they selling it? of your information. I was very uncomfortable with that. So that's one of the reasons in the beginning, I did not choose Zelle, because they were just, they were automatically attaching it to my account, and then they were selling that information for marketing reasons to make money on it. It's not like most companies aren't doing that these days. You just got to be careful, and especially when it's your finances. I don't know what they're doing with that information or who they're selling it to. And I can't say that the other ones aren't doing it. That's the only one I've heard about that they're actually doing that. So you just got to be careful. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your digital wallet. Has anybody made a transaction using their phone at like a Verifone or any of the retail transactions, like for instance, a gas station, grocery store, Walgreens, drugstores, and you just held your phone or your watch up to the actual terminal, and through a wireless transaction, you're making that purchase through your phone or watch. Has anybody done this? No, nobody? Really?
No, I tried, but it didn't work.
Okay. So the first time you do this, I use it on my phone. I use Google Pay. I know a lot of people that use Apple Pay. The first time you do it, if you're in a retail store, like a grocery store, for instance, and you've never done it, the first time you do it, make sure there's, maybe one or two only people in the line, or it's a quiet day, and just try it and ask the clerk who's standing at the cash register, ask them, I've never done this before, I'm a little uncomfortable, and they'll help walk you through it, because this is what they do all day long. But once you do it, it's very fast. It's extremely fast. And they use a technology, it's on your phone. It's already built into your phone. It's called NFC, NF like Frank, C. And it's a technology that's been around since the early 60s. It's called Near Field Communications. It's an app that's built into your phone, and that's something you can turn on or off. But each transaction that you make through your phone or your watch, for instance, I know this sounds crazy. It sounds kind of Star Trek-y when you do this, but each transaction, the encryption code that goes through the credit card number that actually gets inputted from your phone or your watch into the machine is different on every transaction. Okay. If you just take your card and you slide it into the machine and you pull it out, it's taking an imprint of that card each time. But when you use your phone or your watch, it's different. So for instance, if somebody tried to get your identity on one of these transactions using your phone or your watch, they would know exactly where, when, and who, and how. They would know everything, because that key that they put in is only used for that one transaction, and only that one transaction once. And so it is very, very safe to use your phone or your watch. So some people think, well, that's not going to be safe. It's not how I used to do things. At first I went from paper and from currency, then I wrote a check, then I used my credit card, and now we got this electronic transaction. It is safe. And in fact, if you buy anything online through like Amazon or Walmart or whatever you use, there's also some banks that have started to do this. So each time you make a transaction, they will give you a different credit card number for that transaction, just to protect you, just in case. Also, you can use your credit card, your actual credit card, and tap it on the machine, and wirelessly, it will make that transaction as well. So that's another way to use things wirelessly through electronic banking, is to just tap it on your credit card, because it uses that chip, and there's like a little radio frequency built into that card. So again, some of the convenience of doing this, it's fast. It is secure. I would use one of these at my gas station if my gas station that I go to most frequently had the convenience of wireless transaction. It doesn't, so most people use their credit cards. And then there's things called credit cards, what are they called? Not scammers, but there's a way to pull transactions off of gas pumps credit
Skimmers.
card.
Skimmers.
It's called a skimmer.
Thank you. Skimmers,
Skimmer.
yeah, so you guys are a lot sharper than I am on this. So skimmers, you got to be careful about that as well. If it was electronic, I would feel more, I'd feel a lot safer if I could use that. So some of these gas stations are switching over. It is very, very slow, but most retail stores have opened up to use wireless transactions. It's convenient. You don't have to touch the machine, so it's a lot cleaner, germ-free, and it is safer. So that's how that works. Would you like for me to show you a quick video on how it actually works? Yes, no, I have one.
Yes.
If you'd like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me see if I can switch that over here. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. One of the tricky things about making these transactions is you never know where the radio is in the credit card machine. Is it the top right corner, the bottom left? Is it in the center? You just don't really know. And so the first time you do it, it's like, oh boy, it's not working. It's not picking things up. So one thing that needs to be checked on your phone is your near field or NFC radio needs to be turned on your phone. Most of the time it is. That's an NFC. It's near field communications that needs to be turned on. And then you need to have your credit cards in your phone. So if you use an Apple phone, you might want to use Apple Pay, or you can use GPay or Google Pay on your iPhone or your Android phone, or some people use Samsung Pay. They're all very, very similar. There's a little bit of difference, but you need to have at least one credit card in your phone. So when you choose which credit card to make that transaction, it's already built into your phone. It's already been cleared through your bank. And then you'd be good to go. And then literally you go to, you unlock your phone, usually your fingerprint reader, or maybe it's a password. And then just like it showed on the video, you take your phone and you lay it over. You don't have to have it touching the machine. You just lay it over because it's a radio connection, a wireless connection, and it will pick it up and make the transaction, and you confirm it, and you'll see it pop up on the machine. It'll say pay, and then you get a receipt from the retailer or whoever you made that transaction from, just like you would with your credit card. And it will show right up on your phone immediately that you've made a transaction and what the transaction, who it was sent to, and how much it was for. But it is very, very convenient to use. It does, again, the first 1 or 2 times you do it, make sure there's really not many people on the line. It's like that person who writes a check. Remember, it used to write a check and they would hold up the line forever. It's the same thing with these. And once you do it, it's very, very convenient. And it's safe. So, any questions on this?
If you're paying with your actual credit card, you know, some of them have that thing where you don't slide it in.
Yeah, you just tap it.
Is that the same thing or no? That's not.
It's very similar, but the wireless transaction is actually even a little bit better. It takes it a little bit step farther because that specific key, that number that goes in from your device to the terminal at the retail store, is different on each transaction. So it is a little bit safer. I'd highly recommend it. But it is a little bit unorthodox at first. I'm going to say that it took me a 2 or 3 times to figure it out. And then every time I go to take my phone out, especially if different location they have wireless transaction, I never know where that, do I hold it on the top right, center? Where do I put it on this device? So I have to move my phone around, but once it makes that connection, it's super fast. And I know it's convenient and it shows right up on my phone, whether I use Google Pay, Samsung, or Apple Pay, but it shows up on my phone, which is another safety feature, because if a transaction shows up on my phone and I'm not out and about anywhere and like, how did that happen? Then you can call your bank and there is a recourse. So it is
That's
very,
what I
very
was-
convenient.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because yeah, that's where you protect your phone and all that stuff, but is there any way for somebody to hack into the phone? And that's the scary part, you're putting it on the phone.
Yeah, well, there is no way for someone to crack into the phone, certainly because you have to have extra security for your phone. You need at least a fingerprint reader or facial recognition or Face ID, or a password. So if you don't use a password on your phone, you have to actually make these transactions. Otherwise, they won't even let you do it. You just can't have a wide open phone. So everybody does need password protection on your phone. Even if you don't use a digital wallet, you need password protection. You really do, because there's so much critical information on your phone. You don't even think about it. You've got banking information, you got healthcare information. Some of you have credit cards. Soon, I know some of the states, a number of the states around the country, you're going to be able to put your driver's license on your phone. You can put your passport on your phone. So everything's going to be on your phone. So if you're not on the bandwagon of putting a passport on your phone, the world is going to pass you by. There's no doubt about it. So you might as well jump in the bandwagon, because it is very, very convenient just to have one thing. But again, there are risks with any of these things, that's for sure. And there's risks with paper, no doubt about that. Checks nobody really writes checks anymore. So certainly by using one of these terminals, it's a lot safer than actually writing a check, that's for sure. A lot safer. So any questions on this digital wallet? Because it is different, it is new, it is convenient, there's no doubt about it. And there are some perceived inherent risk with it, but I've used it over the course of the last year and a half or so, and it's becoming a lot easier. Think about this, when they actually showed in the video where the gentleman paid his restaurant fee for his meal, is the waitress came out and brought an electronic terminal to his table and made the electronic transaction at the table. Now think about this. Why wouldn't you do it that way versus bring you the little book, the little fancy leatherette book, you put your credit card in it, they take it back to the back and run your credit card, and they're gone for 5 or 10 minutes. That doesn't feel very secure. It doesn't feel very secure to me, but that's what's been around for a long time, but it's not very secure. Versus she brought the electronic terminal out for him to pay the bill, and it happened right there at the table. That to me is a lot safer, tremendously a lot safer. Also, if you ever go out to a restaurant, you see some young, kids, and they never bring cash. They never have cash on them. And they sit around the table and they all take out their phones to pay the bill, and they're paying each other through PayPal or Venmo or some of these other electronic transactions to divvy up the bill. And then they pay the bill electronically. So some of you may have already done this with your friends, but you see a lot of young kids doing it these days, there's no doubt. So any questions on peer-to-peer banking or digital transactions or using your phone, whether it's security or transaction fees or some of these terminologies that you may have never heard? Anybody have any questions or last minute thoughts? Maybe I forgot a few things.
Yes, Lee,
This is
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
I see that paying with your digital wallet is germ-free, but what about being transaction cost-free? Does it cost you anything to do that?
I have never, when I've used my phone to make a transaction fee, no, there's been no, I've never seen a transaction fee for that. Could it happen in the future? I'm sure it could, but I've not seen it. It's a lot faster for the bank. It's cleaner, it's safer for the bank. And so for their end, it's probably a lot easier for them because it just happens faster. But I've not gotten,
Okay.
I have not gotten any fee. There's no 1% or 0.5% fee that they're taking for that convenience. Could they do that in the future? Certainly. They can do anything they want.
And my other thought was when you were talking about all the other things, the Venmo and Zelle and all those things, I'm not sure why I would pay a transaction fee to buy something when I could buy with my credit card and they pay me with 2 or 3 or sometimes 5% rebate. I'm not
And-
that I have to have everything done immediately and worry about it, how convenient it is. But I'm sure
Yeah.
there are people for whom that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I have some family members, for instance, they use, they pay their rent, their monthly rent for their apartment or whatever, and they use it, they use Venmo, they use GPay, and it usually goes from their bank to the other person's bank. There's no credit card, it's just bank to bank, and there's no transaction fee, so it's probably being held up for a day or two, but I've used Venmo for maybe some things that I've purchased, people that I know or trust, and bought certain things from, or we've divvied up maybe a gift or maybe it was a restaurant meal. I've done it that way. And again, we didn't do the 1 or 2 or 3% charge. It just went from bank to bank. So there's certain people that you would maybe maid services, people have had that done. They use Venmo. It just depends. It just really, really depends. And there are some certain conveniences to it. And if you haven't had the need to do it, don't do it. Use your credit card or do a wireless transaction. But there are some conveniences, there's no doubt. Anybody
And
else?
a wireless transaction, how do you define that, please?
A wireless transaction, like I said, peer-to-peer, a wireless transaction would be using your phone at a retail store or at the terminal, like the Verifone that you use at, your grocery store or your pharmacy. That's a wireless transaction.
Thank you. Because one situation I'm thinking of is if you're trying to sell stuff online, either you've got to sell it in person and meet the person and exchange cash, to pay cash, or how are you going to get paid, right? And I'm certainly not going to sell somebody I don't know who on the internet who wants to buy, whatever, right?
Yeah. And most people will request if you buy something through, for instance, like Facebook or Instagram or what are the other ones? Neighborhood, some of the big ones out there, they're probably going to request that you use Venmo or PayPal just for convenience. And if you're not comfortable with it and you don't really need that item that bad, then don't make the transaction. But if you're comfortable with the people, you have a good feeling or a trust or a gut instinct that this person's, it's going to be fine, then make the transaction. But you have to make that decision.
I wonder how they did. I mean, I guess they sent a check before that, I'm assuming. I don't know how, before these things were invented.
Yeah, and most people won't even take a check anymore. So it's really cash. Your choice is electronically, which is convenient, or cash. And most people, if you're buying or selling stuff online, don't even want to deal with cash, because sometimes I know if it's a fairly expensive item, maybe it's $100 or more, for instance, they might say, well, give me 10% down now or 5% or 1% down. And then when you pick up the item and you like the item, then pay the rest of it off. So some of that goes on. You just have to work it out with the person you're making the transaction with, but you got to be careful. No doubt about it.
But this also might, again, might sound far out, but you mentioned Square, whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
Is there any danger at all in when your hairdresser comes and they want you to pay on that little machine on their phone? There's no danger there, is there?
Well,
With
you know,
the
I'm
credit
not
card?
100% sure. I'm not quite sure where the imprint of that card, if it shows up on their phone or stays on that phone. So when that number runs through that little square and your hairdresser takes it, you know, you get done with the hairdresser, you slide your card, they put the little adapter on, it slides through. Is your credit card number and information imprinted on their phone, or does it only go through Square and Square has that information? I just don't know. I'm assuming Square has it, but I'm not 100% sure if that phone doesn't hold on to that information. I just don't know. I'm assuming not, but I don't know. Does anybody else know that one for sure? Yeah, I'm assuming it's held by Square, but I just don't know. You know, I had somebody cut my hair, and it wasn't Zelle they used, but they used another one of the services, and she actually typed in my credit card number into the service on her phone, and I said, yeah, you know what? I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm going to go get some cash. I don't know you from Adam. You're probably fine. You've been in business for a long time, but I'm not feeling good that my credit card information is residing on your phone and you're typing it in. I just didn't feel good about it. So you might want to ask if you're going to a new hairdresser or somebody in the service industry and you're doing a transaction, you might want to say, how do you do payments? You might want to ask them up front. In this new world, a lot of people are just assuming that you have PayPal or Venmo or any of the Zelle or whoever. So you might want to just ask up front. Maybe it's the habit that we need to ask everybody, you know, how do you do payments? We got to get smarter. That's for sure. This stuff's happening fast. So, well, hopefully this was helpful for you. You've learned a few new things here today. Maybe take a little bit of risk or out of your comfort zone. So when you do make a wireless transaction at a bank or a retail store, or grocery store, what have you, you try using your phone. Again, make sure the near field communication is turned on your phone. Go into settings and you're looking for NFC. Make sure it's activated. You have at least one credit card placed in your phone, whether you're using GPay or Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. Those are the biggest ones out there. And the next time you go to the bank or the retail store, hold it over the little Verifone or Ignacio. I think that's the other big brand that's out there that has these electronic terminals. You can try that, or just take your credit card and tap it on the machine. That's another way to do it, and it will pick up the chip. So that's one way to do that. Just be careful when you do any of these electronic transactions that you trust the person at the other end, because there is no recourse. And if you're not comfortable with that, write your state representative, your federal representative, and tell them you'd like to have peer-to-peer protection, and they need to bring it to a vote because it needs to happen. More and more people are using this. Okay. Any other last minute thoughts or questions? Well, thank you. Hopefully you learned a little bit something here this morning on a